SEC dominance, Cooper Flagg, Cal leaving Kentucky. What's the biggest storyline from the college basketball season?
You are Locked On College Basketball, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, folks? Welcome into the Locked On College Basketball Podcast, a daily national college hoop show, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We are your co-hosts. I'm Andy Patton. He is Isaac Schade, and you are joining us at the place to get your college basketball content every single day. I want to thank all of you for making the show your first listen or your first watch of the day, and remind you that you can listen to the show ad-free on Amazon Music. And we got to give a special shout out to those everyday listeners and those of you hanging out with us in the Locked On College Basketball Discord channel. As a note, folks, this show has been recorded in advance about a week ahead of time on Friday, May 30th. Isaac is away this week on vacation. So
sorry. I'm so sorry.
You don't got to apologize for taking a vacation in June in the middle of the college basketball off season, but we still do always want to have that content out there for you. So if there's any breaking news that you're thinking, why didn't we get to that? We'll get to it as soon as we can. I'll get a short up for it, or we'll get it up on next Monday's show. But for today, what we're doing is something that we've done every off season since we started the show, which is kind of just recapping the top 10 storylines. We're also going to give you some honorable mentions from the 2024-25 season. So basically the last calendar year from now. And we want to hear your thoughts, because we're going to give you 10, 12, 13 or so of them with some honorable mentions. But if there's anything you think we missed that we didn't get a chance to touch on the show, please let us know, and we'd love to have those conversations with you all. But Isaac, we got to start. And typically when we do these rankings, we'll go in the reverse order, 10-1, but we're starting at the top. We're starting with number one. And for us, number one was the absolute unquestionable dominance that was the SEC conference this last season. Complete and total dominance. They put 14 teams in the NCAA tournament. The only two teams that did not make it were LSU and South Carolina. Everybody else was in the tournament. We saw them just obliterate the ACC and the SEC ACC challenge in the regular season before the conference play began. And even when they got in the tournament, I mean, I think you see a conference do that kind of dominance and you think, oh, like, we'll see what it looks like when they actually start playing other teams again, blah, blah, blah. But no, they had half the Final Four. They put a bunch of teams in the Elite Eight. They won the dang national championship with the Florida Gators, taking the thing home with Todd Golden. Just an incredible performance from this conference, a conference that has long been known for its football prowess. It was the best on the hardwood last year, and it really wasn't even close.
And it's crazy, Andy, how they didn't just slide by the previous record of 11 held by the Big East back in 20. I mean, they just obliterated that record. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of similar, we'll talk probably somewhere on this show. We're going to talk about Cooper Flagg living up to expectations. I think it's a similar thing here where people were identifying this before the season began, which in and of itself is an interesting thing because the Big 12 has been the dominant conference for a while now. Mm-hmm. But previous to the season, a lot of people were saying, hey, I think this is the SEC's year, and they could get 12, 13, 14 teams in the tournament. So to mention that, to live up to it, to have an utterly historic run through the non-conference portion of the season was just bonkers, Andy. And congrats to Greg Sankey. I guess he can continue to blow smoke up all his team's butts. Andy, let's move to number two.
Yeah, and it's funny. So many of these things were things that we kind of thought before the season of can Cooper Flagg live up to expectations? Can the SEC be this dominant? Will we have, when the tournament schedule came out, will all these one seeds advance? And a lot of those things happened. And the number two for us is Cooper Flagg, because he was every bit the player that people expected, hoped, wanted him to be. His team went on an electric run to the Final Four. He was a huge part of that, coming off that injury, late in the regular season to get healthy, to be able to lead Duke into the Final Four. He led Duke in every statistical category last year. He was their best scorer, their best defender, their best passer. He was tremendous. And as somebody who followed this Duke team really closely this last year, watching what he was able to do, the way he was able to impact winning for this team, I mean, it was incredible. I was fortunate enough to get an opportunity to cover the Locked On Blue Devils show when JJ Jackson was out of town, the great host of Locked On Blue Devils. And the game that I got to cover was Duke Pitt, which is when Cooper Flagg threw down that monstrous dunk on Guillermo Diaz-Graham. And I have not gotten the highlight of Cooper Flagg's dunk out of my head since then, because that was just such an unbelievable play and a high level athleticism. And, it's a lot of times the number one player, the number one recruit doesn't quite live up to expectation, or they're good, but they're not great. But it's hard to deny how incredible Cooper Flagg was last year.
And I think part of it, Andy, is he did it in a different way than a lot of big time players. Like with Zion, it was all about the highlight reel always. Yeah. It was all about scoring a crud ton of points. With Cooper, he did do some of that, but he just has so much that he does so well. And to live up to that with all of that expectation upon you is, I think, infinitely more difficult than people realize it is. So good on Cooper for that. Really interested to see now how he turns things around in Dallas, Andy, crazily enough. All right, number 3 on this thing. I think about this time last year, we might have thought this was going to be number 1, but it is at least on the podium. Coach Cal leaves Kentucky and stays in the SEC. He becomes the great chicken man and goes to call the Hogs as he leaves Lexington. And Andy, it's like both that storyline and the fact that there was this massive coaching carousel that started with SMU that ended with Kevin Young going to BYU with Coach Cal somewhere in the middle of it. And it's so interesting. And then we add into that, because Big Blue Nation is so big and so crazy and so frenzied in like a fun way. Like we love it. That it's like there was the whole turnaround on, man, Mark Pope is not who we want. And all of a sudden it's like Mark Pope is the savior of Kentucky. But, like just so every part of this. And then Andy ultimately culminating in Coach Cal, Coach Pope, and Coach Young and their schools, Arkansas, Kentucky, and BYU, all making the Sweet 16. And so all of that is kind of point number 3 for us in our top 10 storylines here.
Yeah. And we'll, with apologies to USC fans who are a part of this coaching carousel, as Coach Enfield goes to SMU and Eric Musselman goes to USC, which is what prompted Coach Cal to go to Arkansas. USC was not particularly good last year, but to see Arkansas, Kentucky, and BYU all with new coaches, nobody was sure if Coach Cal if it was going to work at Arkansas. He had not been succeeding his last few years at Kentucky, particularly not in the NCAA tournament. Nobody was sure if Mark Pope building a completely new roster from scratch was going to work at all. And honestly, I'm not sure how much confidence there was in Kevin Young, who was a very successful assistant coach with the Phoenix Suns, but he'd never coached at the collegiate level. Like for him to come in and have a ton of success with Yegor Damin and Richie Saunders and Dallin Hall and that really great BYU team. I mean, to see these 3 programs have that kind of success was very unexpected. And I think, now going forward, I mean, what does this mean for Arkansas? Are they going to continue to be successful? I think I'm really high on Kentucky. Obviously, BYU is at a completely different place, bringing in AJ Dibansa and spending $700 million on Rob Wright or whatever it was. Like, this is a program that there's a lot of excitement for all 3 of these teams after what was an incredibly chaotic coaching carousel this past year. Isaac, we got 2 more that we want to talk about here before we move on to the next segment, to the 6 through 10 on our list. But number 4 is about a team that didn't have a ton of success this last year, at least compared to where they'd been previously. There was no three-peat for the UConn Huskies, and honestly, it was pretty clear by Thanksgiving that there probably wasn't going to be a three-peat in stores, as the UConn Huskies really struggled in that event in the not the Battle for Atlantis, but the Maui. They were Maui, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So they really struggled, and it was just a year full of Danny Hurley quotes.
And then they went through that Big East stretch where they literally went win-loss from 4-0 all the way to 10-6, Andy. It was crazy, the back and forth of that. And then ultimately, they almost pulled it out. I think probably one of the forgotten games of the NCAA tournament. Man, they had eventual national champion Florida on the ropes in the second round there. And man, what a game. And so, and then you work into it all this time. Last year, we had all the LA, will he, won't he with Coach Hurley, but ultimately came back. Alex Caravan decided to come back and again now. And so, I mean, when we're talking storylines and things that people are talking about, how could Danny Hurley not but be on this list?
Yeah. Yeah, and just the team just really didn't come together. McNeely got hurt. That was obviously a huge problem. Aiden Mahaney did not live up to expectation for them, but man, it was tough to see for UConn. And then our last one here is kind of I think a boring one in some ways, but certainly a topic that doesn't happen very often. But all four of the Final Four teams were 1 seeds. And, a lot of people who fill out their bracket, they don't want to pick that because they know it's rare. And it is rare. It was the second time it's ever happened. It was the first time since 2008 that all 4 of the 1 seeds were in the Final Four. Of course, 2 of them being from the SEC in Florida and Auburn. You also had Houston and Duke in that, and then the Florida-Houston National Championship matchup. But yeah, it's not the most exciting thing, but it's certainly a storyline when you get chalk as you can get in the Final Four of the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, Andy, it's crazy. And I think it brings up the storyline of people making a big deal about there not being very many Davids to the Goliaths of these 1 seeds. But as we said so often throughout the tournament, it made for great basketball. And so, man, really good. And I think it meant the committee did a great job of choosing these as the 4 1 seeds. And they certainly lived up to the billing. Well, Andy, a team that was seated just behind them, St. John's, you may have heard this before, but Rick Pitino is a pretty good basketball coach, Mr. Patton, and there's just something special about year 2. That's number 6 on our list, coming up in just a second. Right after, though, I tell you about FanDuel. The NBA playoffs are in full swing, and every night delivers highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, and can't-miss moments. So whether it's a game-winning shot or a breakout player, there's never been a better time to get in on the action than right now. FanDuel makes it easy to stay in the game, both before tip-off and live in real time if you don't get a chance to get a bet in before the game starts. With player props, performance trends, same-game parlays, and more, fans like you have more ways than ever to play smart and win big. We're talking some of the big storylines of last year. How about next year's national championship odds? Purdue, Houston, Duke lead the way at plus 1,100, followed by that UConn team we just talked about at plus 1,600. And then Florida, Louisville, Michigan, Kansas, and St. John's all have plus 1,700 odds. If you like some of those, or maybe you think there's some good value with the team further down the road, go check out those odds right now at FanDuel. Are you new to FanDuel? Now's the perfect time to sign up. Head on over to FanDuel.com and place your first $5 bet. If it wins, you're going to get $200 in bonus bets. So go ahead, make every moment more with FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, we're talking our top 10 storylines from the 2024-25-ish academic year. We've just been through 1 through 5. Let me recap quickly. SEC dominance, Cooper Flagg, Coach Cal and the whole coaching carousel. No three-peat for UConn, and all 4 1 seeds made the Final Four. Andy, moving to number 6. Year 2, Ricky P strikes again. This time last year, where we were doing our way too early top 25s, we were like, we think St. John's will be a tournament team. We should have just trusted history, Andy, because precedent tells us that year 2 for Rick Pitino was going to be great, and boy, was it. The Johnnies won the regular season Big East championship. They won the Big East tournament championship. They were a 2 seed in the NCAA tournament, got knocked out sooner than they would have ideally liked to have done so with, oh, by the way, RJ Lewis sitting on the bench, but ultimately Rick Pitino is Rick Pitino, and he shows up again.
Yeah, tremendous stuff again. Like you said, we should have just trusted it. Every year that Rick Pitino's been, when it was at Providence, Louisville, Kentucky, anywhere, he has had a ton of success in his second season. I'm very excited to see what year 3 looks like. For those of you who listened to Monday's show, we did our way too early top 25s, and certainly there's a lot of excitement about Rick Pitino's team. We'll see what the point guard situation shakes out, but certainly a lot of optimism about Pitino going forward, and that was a really fun storyline last year, with seeing how that St. John's team came together. Another not nearly as fun storyline, at least for the fan base, out in Rock Chalk Jayhawk land, because Kansas, pretty rough year for Bill Self and the Jayhawks, really kind of the second straight tough year for Kansas. They finished 6th in the Big 12. They were the preseason number 1 team, not the preseason number 1 Big 12 team, the preseason number 1 overall team. And yet they didn't even finish top 5 in their conference. They went 21-13 overall, just 11-9 in the Big 12, barely finished with a winning record there. Earned a 7 seed, lost to Arkansas. That seems to be a theme. We keep talking about teams that lose to Arkansas in the NCAA tournament as a 7 seed. And honestly, just the entire Hunter Dickinson era, at Kansas just was not good. And it's not, I mean, I'm picking on him, but it wasn't just because of him, obviously. But the transfer portal additions, AJ Storr did not pan out. Zeke Mayo was good, but not great. Rylan Griffin, not the guy they expected to be. And honestly, this is a storyline that doesn't seem to be over, because I'm not particularly confident in what Kansas's roster looks like as we're recording this right now. You know, they have the number one recruit in the country coming in Darren Peterson, but outside of that, you know, Flory Badunga will take a leap, but it has not been a good couple of years for Kansas, and I'm not super confident that the tide's about to turn either.
You know what would have helped Hunter Dickinson? If some guys could have hit some threes, Andy, that would have given him some more space to operate. But living very close to Lawrence like I do, Jayhawk fans are just done. They're like, can we just move on from Hunter Dickinson and get to a new era? I'm excited for Flory Badunga to have the paint to himself, basically. All right. Number 8 on our list, Andy. We're going to stay in the Big 12 because the team that is doing right now what Kansas used to do is Houston, who just came into the Big 12 2 years ago. So storyline number 8, Houston dominates the Big 12 for the second straight year in its first 2 years of the Big 12. Andy, Houston comes into the Big 12 from the American Athletic Conference, and all the people ask, including us, how will they translate? Well, just fine. Thank you very much. They've won the Big 12 regular season championship by multiple games in each of those years, were the runner-up in the Big 12 tournament that first year, and then won the Big 12 tournament this year, not to mention coming within an Emmanuel Sharp mistake or two of the national championship. I hate to say it that way, but I say that in a good way, to say they were that close to us talking about them as the national champion and not Florida. Crazy, crazy stuff for Houston. Another great year. And Andy, as you said about Kansas, not feeling good about them again this year, we both have Houston as preseason number 1. So it just keeps on rolling for Kelvin Sampson, man. This thing is impressive.
Houston went 19-1 last year in the Big 12, and the Big 12 has dropped down to an 18-game conference schedule. So nobody may ever break Houston's record for 19 wins in a conference season. What an incredible season. And like you said, it's not over. With this team's got an incredible freshman class coming in. They get Milos Uzan back. I'm incredibly excited about what Houston is going to be able to do next year after already having so much success the last couple of years. Number 9 on our list, Isaac, is going to the ACC, where we had some coaches retiring, some of them retiring at kind of odd times. And it's been a storyline in the ACC for a couple of years now, dating back to Coach K, leaving, and Roy Williams leaving, and Mike Bray, and Jim Boeheim, and a handful of others. But this past year, Tony Bennett retired on October 18th, like just 19 days before the season was set to begin. Tony Bennett said, yeah, I'm good. And he kind of timed it that way in order to prevent a lot of transfer portal departures for Virginia. They, in fact, only had one, Jalen Warley, who went to Gonzaga. But it didn't turn out to be a very good year for Virginia. And then Jim Larinaga retired in the middle of the season. He retired on Boxing Day, the day after Christmas, because he was just kind of tired of what was amounting to be another second straight terrible season for the Hurricanes. So you lose those two coaches. Leonard Hamilton actually did it the quote unquote right way by announcing during the season, hey, I'm going to step away at the end of the year, but I want to, finish out the season and also help Florida State make their next head coaching hire, which they did in Luke Laux from the NBA ranks. And Jim Larinaga was replaced by Jay Lucas, and Tony Bennett replaced by Ryan Odom. And I think part of the storyline is not only that, but also, the new coaches coming in, which we had a show about that, I think 2 weeks ago or last week. Yeah. We talked about these 3 new coaches, as well as Will Wade, who replaced Kevin Keats, who was fired at the end of the year, and how there's a lot of excitement about the new coaches in the ACC. But this conference used to be dominated by the old heads, and it's not anymore. And seeing all these departures certainly kind of brought that to the forefront.
Yes, Brad Brownell, now the elder statesman of the ACC. And good for him for finally moving off the hot seat after all those years. Number 10, Andy, on our biggest storylines, we actually stay in the ACC here with another coaching thing, and that's Pat Kelsey, man. What a job he has done to get Louisville turned around so quickly, running around campus, inviting people to game. I mean, it's crazy stuff. Mm-hmm. They go, Andy, from winning 12 combined games in the 2 years under Kenny Payne to going 27-8 overall, 18-2 in the ACC last year. Maybe underseeded because of the disrespect to the ACC. I don't know. Ends up losing to Creighton in the first round. But man, I don't know about you, Andy. And I think part of the reason we have this as number 10 is because I think Pat Kelsey is going to be at Louisville for a while because, man, he's got things rolling. we both feel good about where things are at. Hopefully Ali Khalifa gets to play this year. We talked about that back on Monday's show as well. But man, Pat Kelsey, the quick turnaround. And how about this? More than doubling the amount of wins this year that Kenny Payne had in his first 2 years combined. Insane stuff. Good for Pat Kelsey. Let's keep it rolling.
I think part of it too is the conversation of just how many coaches have had these immediate 1 year turnarounds, like Kelsey did, like Mark Pope did, like Kevin Young did. And then you see, is that going to happen at Virginia this year? Is that going to happen at NC State this year? Is that going to happen? It's going to be really interesting to see if. I think the expectation now is that coaches you don't need to give them 3 years. Like you kind of got to expect it sooner. And there's some good and some bad with that, I think. But Pat Kelsey certainly proved that you can turn a program that looked in unbelievably bad shape, that you can find a way to turn them around. And I'm excited to see what some of the other teams, even in the ACC, are going to be able to do next year if they can do that same thing. Yeah,
because you set some unhealthy expectations potentially, like Jerome Tang has done at K-State, or Rodney Terry did at Texas, and now we've got a new coach in Austin.
Well, Isaac, two of the top NBA draft prospects that aren't Cooper Flagg, in fact, the two top ones that aren't Cooper Flagg by most accounts, they teamed up. And we didn't even get to see them play in March because that team did not do well. We're going to talk about that and some of our other honorable mention storylines from this past season coming up here in just a second. All right, Isaac, closing out the show, we talked about our 10 biggest storylines in the last year of college basketball. Now we're going to talk about some honorable mentions, some things that didn't quite make our list, but that we thought deserved a mention here. And like we said, if there's something that you didn't hear that you thought deserved to be on the list, either something we're about to mention that didn't make the top 10 or something that we didn't mention at all, definitely let us know in the comments. We'd love to hear. There's obviously a ton of things happening in college hoops this past year, but the first honorable mention, we kind of teased it there, is Rutgers. And Rutgers wasn't really worth talking about throughout the season because their performance wasn't all that good. But the problem is they had much higher expectations because they had Dylan Harper and Ace Bailey. Dylan Harper, the consensus number 2 overall ranked prospect behind Cooper Flagg, a 6'6" point guard who's just tremendously talented. And then Ace Bailey, he's kind of slipped a little bit in the rankings. I think there was some concern about his size and some of the other things in the combine. But those two guys are outrageously good. They're going to almost certainly be top 5 picks. If Bailey might slip as far as 5, but I don't think he's going to slip any farther than that. And to have 2 top 5 picks and not be good is pretty remarkable. And I'll say this, I'm somebody who's peruses the NBA draft subreddit, and a lot of the people who are on that Reddit page are not necessarily people who follow college basketball. And every day there's somebody who's like, how was Rutgers bad? How were they not good? And it's like, well, the rest of that roster was not good. Like they just did not have, it felt like they only had 2 players who were really even Big Ten caliber players on the roster, and everybody else just really wasn't all that good. It was a frustrating season for Rutgers, but it wasn't even due to those 2 guys. It was just we wanted to see if Rutgers could make some noise in the Big Ten, and Isaac, they sure couldn't.
No, they could not, and that's enough said. Somebody who we hope makes some noise in the Big Ten this upcoming year is Ben McCollum. You like that transition? Who's, man, it was one of, Andy, I don't know about you, this might have been my favorite storyline from this year's NCAA tournament, is Ben McCollum coming from the D2 level to coaching Drake, stepping in for Darren DeVries, who went to West Virginia last year and is now on the move again. But Ben McCollum brings a quartet of guys with him from the D2 level, all of whom are in the starting lineup for Drake, who wins an NCAA tournament game. It's a crazy story. And now Ben McCollum is going from D2 to mid-major to high major all in 1 year, bringing Bennett Sturts along with him for the ride. Andy, this is just such a cool storyline from last year.
Yeah, it was a super fun one. I love seeing what they're able to do, and I'm excited to see what Ben McCollum can do at Iowa, like you said. Our next storyline is unfortunately a much sadder storyline. Many of these are coaching related, but this one is coaching related, but it's not a fun one. For those of you who maybe forgot about this or just didn't hear about it, Amir Abdur-Rahim, the head coach for South Florida, who had so much promise as a head coach, passed away very unexpectedly in late October, just a few weeks before the season was set to begin for the Bulls. He'd been at Kennesaw State. He came over to South Florida. I think they went 25-8 in his first year with the Bulls, and was kind of one of these young up and coming coaches. And then just, again, it was so sudden and tragic and heartbreaking to happen right before the season. And they ended up replacing him with Brian Hodgson this offseason. He's coming over as the head coach on March 24th, and he's going to step into that role. But just really sad anytime somebody passes away so young, and somebody who, again, I think had a lot of potential to become like a real base in college basketball. I mean, I think he could have had 2 more great years at South Florida and ended up at a high major and would be a coach we'd be talking about with a ton of upside. And it's just unfortunate that things went the way that they did for him.
Yeah, Andy, and I also just want to say a word of just good job to Ben Fletcher for stepping in as the interim head coach of this team. Obviously, it wasn't a wildly successful year for USF, but just to keep it respectable, keep things afloat, I just can't imagine going through that. So just want to say that as well. Andy, no good way to turn from that to the next couple things, but a couple coaches that are gone from their school. Mike Woodson, the next in the line of alums that hasn't worked out at their school, joining Juwan Howard, joining Pat Ewing, etc. It's funny, once he announced he was going to step away, things kind of turned around for Indiana. Yeah. Andy, I think we thought they got to the point where they were going to make it in. And then on Selection Sunday, it was crickets for the Hoosiers, kind of a weird ending to all of that. But, I guess the thing I would say is, good for Mike Woodson for just saying, you know what, it's probably better if I just step aside and be done with it. And so that's where we are. Yeah.
And I think it kind of goes back to that conversation of programs feel like they can get coaches in who are going to turn them around really quickly. So they're not going to put up with multiple years of mediocrity, especially programs that are spending a lot of money. I mean, they gave Mike Woodson basically a blank check last year, and he had a ton of money to spend. And it just, they built a roster that had a lot of talent, but that the roster construction was questionable even as soon as that roster was put together. And then his ability to get the most out of those players just never really materialized. Like we said, I think they probably deserve to be in the tournament, but I'm not surprised that Woodson stepped away. And a lot of those things are kind of true of the next thing that we're going to talk about here, which is Kyle Neptune at Villanova, who was given 3 years. And nobody wants to replace a legend. And the success rate of coaches who replace legends is pretty slim. It's a difficult task, and replacing Jay Wright was no easy task for Kyle Neptune, but never really came together for him at Villanova. For anybody who watched parts of the NCAA tournament, he was on the broadcast. He was exceptional at that. I was thrilled listening to him talk about basketball. So maybe that's the direction for Coach Neptune, because it just didn't work for him on the sidelines. Again, Villanova had some money. They had some opportunity to bring in some talented players, and Eric Dixon was incredible. They brought in Wooga Poplar, and it never really worked. So he was Jay Wright's choice. Again, legends are kind of given the opportunity to do that. But now Villanova they hired Kevin Willard from Maryland, which was also a weird storyline, as that happened during the NCAA tournament, where Kevin Willard basically said that he was leaving Maryland and was like criticizing the front office before their Sweet 16 game, which was insanely bizarre. But love him or hate him, Kevin Willard is a good basketball coach, and I suspect this will help turn Villanova around, even if his departure from Maryland was a weird one.
Speaking of fan bases frustrated by their coach, Andy, Sean Miller has left Xavier again, this time to head to Austin, Texas, to be the head coach of the Longhorns, where Rodney Terry is out. And I guess the other side of it is part of the storyline too, is that Richard Pitino is the one that comes in to replace him, now in the same league as his dear old daddy. Storylines abound both there in the SEC with Texas. That's still weird to say. Man, yeah. There's a storyline we didn't talk about, Andy, was coach conference realignment stuff for this year was a big thing. But anyway, Andy, that brings us unceremoniously to our last honorable mention. I won't make you say it. After one of the most insane runs we've seen in college basketball, Gonzaga's Sweet 16 streak comes to an end. And it's one of those things where it's like, it's sad when it ends, but it's a reminder of how insane it's been. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's such a bittersweet thing to see. I love records. I love streaks. I love seeing that. And just what Mark Few continues to do up there in Spokane is bonkers. And, but that streak does come to an end after a glorious, glorious near decade run.
If it's going to come to an end, coming to an end in a 2-point game against a team that ended up going to the national championship in Houston, like, that's the way to go. I thought Gonzaga was underseeded as an 8 seed. I think they should have been a 6 or a 7. I think if the way Gonzaga was playing at the end of the year, if they'd gotten a 6 or a 7, they might have this might not be a storyline, or it'd be the opposite. We talk about them extending that streak to 10 years instead of it ending at 9. But getting Houston in the second round was a really brutal blow, and they were a Caliph battle, bad possession away from potentially winning that game and changing that storyline significantly. Unfortunately, it didn't go in their direction. But anytime you can make the Sweet 16 9 years in a row, you got to feel pretty darn good about it. And it's just been incredible what the Zags have been able to build up in Spokane.
Time to restart it in the 26 NCAA tournament. Andy, that's a fun show, talking the top 10 storylines and honorable mentions. As Andy said earlier, we'd love to know your storylines in terms of things that we either left out according to you, or things where you agree or disagree with us. Guys, we hope you have a phenomenal weekend. It's been another great week to be together. Andy and I will be back with you on Monday's show. I literally today, Friday, I am coming back from my vacation and excited to dive back in already. If you haven't subscribed to the show on video and audio, we'd love to have you do that so you don't miss a second of Locked On College Basketball. If you've not joined our Discord, where we're talking college basketball all the time, that link is in the show notes, absolutely free. As always, we want to say apologies to the Lawyer family. Let's go Wild Pope. Shouts to McBruins, and until Monday, peace.